So, did Peter use the term Christian? Well, if you read 1 Peter 4 in King James or in the Greek, it appears that he did. But is it true? Did he actually use that term? So let's go to the scripture, or right here. It's in 1 Peter 4 and verse 16. If any man suffer, I wonder why that's written this way in italics. As a Christian, let him not be ashamed. All right. Well, first of all, Peter spoke Hebrew. He only spoke limited Greek. And it is agreed that he didn't write very well in Greek at all. So this is the reason why people think somebody else wrote the book or the epistles. But look what it says right here in 1 Peter 1. Not Jesus Christ, but Yehoshua Messiah, he said, or Moshiach. Peter, an apostle of Yehoshua Moshiach. This letter is written to the strangers, the exiles. Let's go to Strong's Concordance. The sojourners. Scattered. Who was scattered? Who was dispersed among the Gentiles? The Jews. So he was speaking to the Hebrews. You see, Peter, as well as all the other 11 apostles, they were specifically sent to the Hebrews. This plainly states that he was talking to, this letter was to the Hebrews scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. It's a province in Asia Minor. Elect. Wait a minute. Elect according to grace. Is that what he says? No. Elect according to the foreknowledge of not God, Jehovah the Father, through sanctification of the Spirit, unto obedience and the sprinkling of the blood of Yehoshua Moshiach. No, not Jesus, folks. You see this? Yehoshua. That is the name of the Messiah. He's not going to share that glory with anybody else. All right. So, whom he foreknew. Oh, hold on. Where was I? Here we go. No. Let's go back here. To the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. Elect according to the foreknowledge of Jehovah the Father. So I'm going to give you one more added proof he was speaking to Hebrews and Hebrews only in these epistles. Right? Let's go to Romans 11. Very first thing that Paul says to the Romans, he is correcting them. He is chastising the Romans. He is warning them that they're on the wrong track. They have taken a detour. He's warning them. He says, I say then, has Jehovah cast away his people? Jehovah forbid, because I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham and the tribe of Benjamin. He has not cast away his people, which, what is that? What? Foreknew? Foreknew. of the old covenant. The foreknowing is of the old covenant. He has not cast away his people, which he foreknew in the old covenant. So we go back to 1 Peter 1, and he says, elect according to the foreknowledge of Jehovah the Father. Now, just so we get all the truth that we can here, we go down here. Concerning, and so all Israel shall be saved. Verse 26, as is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away unholiness from Jacob, because this is my covenant, the new covenant, unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Concerning the gospel, they may be enemies for your sakes, O Roman, but concerning the election, they are the beloved for the patriarchs' sakes. Okay. So they are the elect for the patriarchs' sakes. So Peter is telling them here, and he is saying, elect according to the foreknowledge of Jehovah the Father, through the sanctification of the Spirit, unto obedience and the sprinkling of the blood of, not Jesus, because the word Jesus did not exist back in those days. And these Hebrews did not speak very much Greek at all. They still spoke Hebrew. Jesus is not a Hebrew word. Christ is not a Hebrew word. Now, let's go to 1 Peter 4 again. So why is this written in this way? I want to first of all go to this particular article, earlychristianwritings.com, 1peter.html. All right? Paul J. Achtemeyer writes, the letter therefore, beginning with a carefully crafted exordium whose purposes was to win the attention of the audience, following a series of topical discussions and concluding with peroration, shows elements of judicial and epidioletic structures, but seems to reflect most closely the deliberative rhetoric of its Hellenistic age. Was Peter Hellenized? No, he was not. Whether or not the author set out to deliberately to craft a letter that included such elements of formal Hellenistic rhetoric is difficult to say, although it would be equally difficult to deny him all acquaintance with the formal rhetoric in light of the shape of the letter itself. So this particular person is making absolutely no sense. So we'll go to the next one. Eric Eve writes, despite 1 Peter 1 verse 1, the author is unlikely to have been the Apostle Peter. Really? Really? We just read right here, Peter, an apostle of Yehoshua Messiah, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, etc. He's clearly saying that he is Peter the apostle. There was only one. So this guy here is essentially denying that it was the Apostle Peter writing the Epistle of Peter, or the Epistles of Peter. Like most Christians today, don't believe he wrote it. Unlikely to have been the Apostle Peter. The cultured Greek of the epistle makes it perhaps the most literary composition in the New Testament. The Apostle Peter probably knew some Greek, but 1 Peter does not look like the product of an unlettered Acts 4:13. What do you suppose that is? They're not taking one particular possibility into account, folks. product of an unlettered, Acts 4, verse 13, Galilean fisherman. An uneducated Galilean fisherman would not be so eloquent in Greek. Of course not. Indeed, somebody else would be. But why are they not considering the fact that it was translated from Hebrew to Greek by somebody who they don't know? Have they ever bothered to consider that? No, they did not. When you look at their writings, it's obvious that they had not considered that. It employs a sophisticated vocabulary incorporating several New Testament. I have no idea what these two words mean. And its author appears to have some command of the techniques of Hellenistic rhetoric. He is also intimately acquainted with the Old Testament in the LXX, whereas we should have expected the Galilean Peter to have a more familiar with an Aramaic Targum or the Hebrew. Well, he did. Can't you tell by now that somebody, some unnamed person, went and attempted to translate what Peter wrote into Greek? They haven't considered that. So when we go back to 1 Peter 4, even the experts are saying, no, Peter did not write this. Not in Greek. But they're also saying that he didn't write it at all in Hebrew. Well, he did write it in Hebrew. He did not write it in Greek. Somebody else did. Somebody else replaced words that Peter spoke correctly into words that were spoken incorrectly, words that Peter did not say. For instance, the word Christian. So what was the word that Peter used if he did not say Christian? The answer, let's see if it's, I think it's right here. Right here. Hebrew term. So everybody agrees that Peter was well versed in Hebrew and that he did not speak very much Greek and wrote it even less. But they want to completely dismiss the fact that he did write the book of Hebrews. I mean, that he did write the epistles of Peter. Okay? They want to dismiss that altogether. They do not want to take into account the fact that somebody came behind them and translated Peter's words into Greek and used or took liberties with that translation. So what is the word in Hebrew? The word that he would have used would be Natsri. A Talmudic term originally derived from the fact that not Jesus, but Yehoshua, because the name Jesus did not exist back then, came from a Galilean village of Nazareth, today in northern Israel. Natsri. So when you read 1 Peter 4, it should read like this. Verse 12. 1 Peter 4, verse 12. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fire trial which is coming to try you. The coming persecution upon the Jews is what he was talking about. He knew it was coming. As though some strange thing happened to you, but rejoice as much as you are partakers of Moshiach suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, you might be glad with exceeding joy. Well, we read in Matthew 24 that at his return, the Gentiles are going to be mourning. They're not going, they won't have no part of him. Who's the one that's looking for the Messiah? The Jews. They're the ones that talk about Moshiach all the time. And the Christians today, they consider Israel's Moshiach to be their Antichrist. If you are reproached for the name of Moshiach, happy are you, for the Spirit of glory and of Jehovah rests upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or a busybody in other men's matters. Okay, yet if any man suffer as a Nazri, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify Jehovah on his behalf. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of Jehovah. Well, that goes all the way back to the book of Jeremiah. Jerusalem. Is it Jeremiah 25? Let's go look. I think it is. It's here. Right here. First of all, I got to go to King James Version because this version is making it difficult. All right. Hold on. Be patient with me. All right, here we go. Verse 27, therefore you shall say unto them, the Gentiles, this is what Jehovah says, the Elohim of Israel, drink and be drunken, and spew, and fall, and rise no more, because of the sword which I will send among you. And it shall be, if they refuse to take of the cup at your hand to drink, then you shall say unto them, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, you shall surely drink. For look, I will begin to bring evil upon the city which is called by my name. He starts with that one. And should you be utterly unpunished, you shall not be unpunished. For I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, says Jehovah of hosts. So it begins with the city which is called by his name, Jerusalem. All right, so we go back to 1 Peter 4. And it says, verse 17, for the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of Jehovah. And if it begin there first with us, the Jews, what shall the end of them that obey not the gospel of Jehovah? And if the righteous scarcely be saved, then where shall the unrighteous and the sinner appear? All right. You get it? Now there are going to be some of you who will cling to your narrative until you die. I cannot help those people. Okay? But my point here today was to show you the, how do I put this? The confusion that Bible scholars today and for many years had concerning Peter's writings, even claiming that he didn't write it, that he could not have written it. Well, he could so have. It's just that they did not consider the fact that this was very likely translated into Greek by somebody else who took liberties with his writings. Now, even Peter himself warned about people who go and take the words of Paul out of context and twist it like they do other scriptures. He calls them names. Unlearned is one of them. Let's see here. 2 Peter 3 and verse 16. So here, Peter is defending the words of Paul. And incidentally, the Catholic Church views Peter 3, 2 Peter 3, as something that they do not abide by. They don't believe that he wrote this. And right here he talks about the day of Jehovah's wrath coming. Okay? And now where did here we go. Verse 14, therefore, beloved, looking forward to those things, looking forward to these things, the day of Jehovah's wrath, be diligent to be found by him in peace, without spot and blameless, and consider that the long suffering of our Moshiach is salvation, just like our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him, has written to you. So Paul also wrote to the Hebrews. Peter did not write to the Gentiles. So Peter was speaking to Jews and backing up the words of Paul that Paul wrote to the Hebrews, saying that he is accurate, he is right. Then he gave this warning, as in all his epistles. And he speaks in them these very things that are in this whole chapter. Now, in which some things are hard to understand, that untaught and unstable people twist to their own destruction. Who found it difficult? Who found the words of Paul difficult? It was the unlearned and unstable. I didn't want to go to New King James Version. Let's try again. Verse 16, as also in his epistles, all his epistles, speaking in them these very things, in which some are hard to be understood, which they who are unlearned and unstable wrestle, just like they do also all the other scriptures, and they do so to their own destruction. Well, guess what? Do you think that the words of Peter was not going to be exempt from people who twist words, doing so to their own destruction? Come on. Come on. Let's dig a little deeper, shall we, folks? Let's use the brains that our Father in heaven, our Abba in heaven, has given to us. We can do better than that. We don't need to be those people who twist the words of the apostles and do so to their own destruction. No. We found out what Peter really said right here. Not 3. You see, folks, it was the Syrians, it was the Gentiles who erroneously called the Nazri Christians. You can see, I believe it's in the book of Acts. And it's not hard to find. Acts 11, verse 26. So who were the people of Antioch? The disciples themselves didn't call each other Christians. I'll provide you proof in just a second here. But when he had found him, he brought him unto Antioch. Antioch is in Syria. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the congregation and taught many people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So it was the Syrians who started calling them Christians, just like the people in Europe called the baptizers in Europe Anabaptists. Anabaptists didn't give themselves that name. The Mennonites did not give themselves the name Mennonite. It was given by outsiders and it stuck. Same with the Amish. It was given by outsiders and it stuck. Very clearly you'll see this has been given to these people, the Nazri, by outsiders and it stuck. But what did Paul say? All right. Paul speaking to the Romans. And of course, when we see in verse 9, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile, but this is incorrect. Indeed means Gentile, but let's do the Strong's Concordance and let's be accurate. Let's be honest and accurate when we read these words. Hellene. To the Jew first and also to the Hellene. Well, who are the Hellenes? Hellenes are Greeks who founded Western civilization. Today, since the judgment is going to come eventually upon the Hellenes, today that judgment means it's going to be upon Western civilization, according to the words of Paul. This is the reason why it's so important to study carefully. Use Strong's Concordance. Use the Bible dictionaries. Get accurate and make sure your information is accurate, folks. In this way, so to the Jew first, we just read in Jeremiah 25, right here. Therefore you shall say to them, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, drink and be drunken, and spew and fall, and rise no more, because of the sword which I will send upon you. And it shall be, if they refuse to take the cup at your hand to drink, then you shall say unto them, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, you shall surely drink, for lo, I start to bring calamity on the city which is called by my name, Jerusalem. Yerushalayim. To the Jew first, and you, Gentiles, shall not, and you should be utterly unpunished. You shall not be unpunished, for I will call for a sword upon all the inhabitants of the earth, saith Jehovah. So, right here, verse 31, a noise has come in all the way to the ends of the earth, for Jehovah has a controversy with the Goi, and he will judge all flesh, and he will give them that are wicked to the sword, saith Jehovah. All right. So he begins with Jerusalem, and he did. That was 67 to 74. And the Gentiles think that they're going to go utterly unpunished. They have no idea why this is happening, what is happening today. You see, timing is everything. During the Spanish flu of the early 1900s, Was that time yet? No. The 7 sevens of Daniel 9 hadn't even begun. But the 7 sevens of Daniel 9, when I say 7 sevens, you had 62 sevens, you had 1 7. Those are already passed, in spite of what your preacher tells you. Those are already passed. And at June 1967, the countdown began for the final 7 sevens. The call to rebuild Jerusalem unto Messiah, the Prince. 7 sevens came and went. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. 2 Peter 3. Verse 3. Knowing this, that there shall come in the last days, that's the days that we live in right now, scoffers. So when he's speaking, this particular line, this particular subject matter, he's talking exclusively about us who live in these days after the 7 sevens of Daniel 9 are finished. Okay? Or after the 77s of Daniel 9 are finished. And as I pointed out so many times before, the final 7 sevens finished in 2016. Seven times 7 is 49. 1967, summer of 1967 to the summer of 2016 is 49 years. For since the patriarchs fell asleep, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, everything continue as they were from the beginning of creation. Because of this, they are willingly ignorant of that by the word of Jehovah, that heavens were of old and the earth standing up out of the water and in the water, whereby the old world that was, being overflowed with water, it perished. That civilization was wiped out. And these people today think that because everything, the cycle just keeps going and that nothing is ever going to change. This is what Peter is talking about. But the heaven and the earth, which are currently now, by that same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire, against the day of judgment and perdition of unholy men. Destruction. The word perdition means destruction. Let's go to Strong's Concordance. Destruction. Just like the old world was. Noah's world of unholy men, unpious men. But beloved, do not be ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with Jehovah as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. Jehovah is not slack concerning his promise. Is he slack because 4 years has gone by after the 77s of Daniel 9 is finished? No, he's not. Peter gives the reason why time has continued these past 4 years. Not as some men count slackness, but he is long-suffering to us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. If there is any delay, that's the reason. If there is any amount of space, that is the reason. That is the only reason. But the day of Jehovah's wrath will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens or the sky, the atmosphere, will make a rushing sound. And the elements of what? When Jehovah's throne comes down at the Temple Mount. The elements shall melt with fervent heat. Yes, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and everything around it is all going to melt, and we do not know how far I've had arguments even with some of my own kin about whether or not the Temple Mount is the holy place. And I told them it doesn't matter, because the throne is going to come down and melt everything around that place. With fervent heat, and the earth and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you be in all holy conversation and holiness, piety, looking for and hastening to the coming of the day of Jehovah, where the heavens being on fire, where the atmosphere being on fire shall be loosed, released, or dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we according to his promise. What promise? All Israel shall be saved. I know Gentiles don't like me saying that. Too bad. Too bad. I'll say it anyway. Look for a new heaven and a new earth whereupon dwells righteousness. Now, folks, so this is the reason, this is one of the many reasons why I warn Christians that they're going to come against Israel's Messiah. Because Israel's Messiah, Israel's Moshiach, is not Jesus Christ. And his followers are not Christians. Paul said, right here, verse 9, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile, also to the Hellene. But glory, honor, and peace to every man who works good, to the Jew first. And if you read Matthew 25 carefully, you will realize this. After Yehoshua secures his kingdom and sits on his throne of glory, the Jews already being there, all Israel, in fact, already being there, behind the protection of the angels. I need to learn how to say angels in Hebrew. Malach, I guess that's what it is. Or Malachim. For there is, okay, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. Oh yeah, tribulation, anguish upon every soul that does evil, of the Jew first and also the Gentile. But glory, honor, and peace to every man that works good, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile, for there is no respect of persons with Jehovah. Now, Christians today would view that as respect of persons, to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. They would have a problem with that. They would call that discrimination. That's the problem with Gentiles. They don't know their place. Let's go to Matthew 25. Parable of the sheep and goats. Verse 31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy Malachim with him, then he shall sit upon his throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all the what? Gentiles. Where are the Jews? They've been pre-gathered. To the Jew first, and then the Gentiles. You see. We just read it, did we not? Of course we did. I know you Gentiles don't like that. Too bad. Live with it. Gentiles. Before him shall gather all the Gentiles, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep of the Gentiles on his right hand, but the goats of the Gentiles on his left. And then shall the king say unto them, Come, ye blessed of my Abba, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, and saying, Master, not Lord, Master. Lord is a name of Baal. Saying, Master, when did we see you hungry and fed you, or thirsty and gave you drink? When did we see you a stranger and took you in, or naked and clothed you? Or when did we see you sick in prison and came unto me? And the king shall answer them and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these my brethren. Well, if he's talking to the Gentiles, who are not his brethren, but who are righteous, who, pray tell, are his brethren? Checkmate, folks, the Jew. This guy, the Jew. That's who his brethren are. You have done it unto me. He's going to invite them into his kingdom, but to the Jew first, and then the Gentile. Think about that. Gentile Christians, you think you're in first place and the Jew is in last place. Well, you're wrong. You're wrong. Now, still did not go to the scripture that I wanted. All right. Romans 2, verse 29. Let's go to Strong's Concordance, make sure. Verse 29. All right. "25. For circumcision verily profits if you keep the Torah. But if you be breaker of the Torah, your circumcision is made uncircumcision. Therefore, if the circumcision keep the righteousness of the Torah, shall not his uncircumcision, or shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision?" I need to read this again. "For circumcision verily profits if you keep the Torah. But if you are a breaker of the Torah, your circumcision is made uncircumcision. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law," what is that? What is the righteousness of the Torah? "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Because within that particular commandment, as one of the other apostles said, I believe it was either John or James, you cannot claim that you love Jehovah if you hate your brother. So all of the commandments are within that one commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So if the uncircumcised keep the law of you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is exactly the reason why these Gentiles were placed on the right hand of the Messiah, because their neighbor happened to be Jews, their relatives, the least of the brethren of Yehoshua. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, love your neighbor as yourself, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? Of course. Of course it'll be counted for circumcision. What does that make him then? Let's continue. And shall not uncircumcision, which by nature, if it fulfill the Torah. How does that fulfill the Torah? Let me show you something. I'll show you. Let us make things clear here. Hangs the law. Huh? And the prophets. It better be there. Well, we'll look it up on Google and find it that way. Matthew 22, verse 40. All right, watch this. 22 and verse 40. We'll start in verse 36. Master, which one of the greatest commandments in the law? Yehoshua, not Jesus, said, you shall love Jehovah your Elohim with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is just like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang the Torah and the prophets. All right? So we go to, where were we? Right. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the Torah. How does it fulfill the Torah? Loving Jehovah and loving your neighbor. Judge you, who by the letter and circumcision transgresses the Torah. For that person is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision which is outward of the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly. And the circumcision that is of the heart in the spirit and not of the letter. So in the end, in the finale, even the Gentile who has circumcision of the heart, as described in Matthew 25, those will be incorporated into one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Why? Because keeping the great commandments, love Jehovah and love your neighbor, and they did so by taking care of the least of Yehoshua's brethren, the Jew, made them a Jew. Just like Rahab, the harlot's act of taking care of those two Israelite spies made her a Jew. That's right. She was incorporated into the tribe of Judah. And just as Rahab or Ruth said to Naomi, your people are my people. Your Elohim is my Elohim. Jehovah became her Elohim. Wherever you go, Naomi, I will go. And where You are buried, Naomi. That's where I will be buried. Because of that circumcision of the heart, she became a Jew, not a Christian.